Welcome to the Level Up Podcast. I am Brandon Snipes, and today we're talking with the fantastic Holly Renee Miller, or HR for short. She is the founder of a Center for Eating Disorders, and she herself has overcome and battled anorexia, a 15-year battle with anorexia, and now she's dedicated her life to helping others overcome eating disorders for good. So stay tuned. All right, Holly Renee, glad to have you here.
Thanks, Brandon.
How's your day been so far?
So far, good. I've been hanging out doing a bunch of plants, so I'm good.
Is that right? Plants where at the center?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so tell me what you're doing, because I've seen some pictures maybe early during the quarantine, the lockdowns. You had a project you were able to pour yourself into at the center. And at the Center for, it's called a Center for Eating Disorders.
Center for Eating Disorders. It's about as generic as you can get.
That's great. Yeah, and you're the founder and clinical director, is that right?
I'm the founder and clinical director, yes.
Okay, and also the plants person.
Yeah, jack of all trades.
Yeah,
Definitely.
So what do you have going on plants-wise there right now?
You know, when COVID hit, it was kind of a shock. We weren't really sure what we were going to do. Were we going to be in person? Were we going to go virtual? Being a mental health facility, it was really difficult to kind of contemplate having to do virtual care for others. There's just so much necessary that goes on in the relationship in terms of therapy that you just need to be present for. So we're trying to figure out how to make it work. And one of the things is, okay, we got to get outside. And the one thing I feel really fortunate about is we have this really amazing space in the middle of the city that has all of this land, and it was just a big mud pit. So one day I just went outside and was like, I wonder what we could be doing here. And it turned into what my business partner will tell you is supposed to only be a deck.
Started with a deck.
It started with a deck. We'll just build a deck. We can do groups outside. And it's now probably about a 15,000 square foot park and secret garden area with outdoor offices and hidden spaces and big stone grass garden. So, so it's kind of taken over my life for the last couple of months, you might say.
That's awesome. Has it been fun to pour yourself into creating a beautiful space from scratch?
Yeah, and I think it's been definitely an investment and made me kind of recognize a little bit of what I'm investing in. There's always room for growth. I didn't know a thing about plants. I learned that they're really expensive, and you got to take care of them, and so it's been interesting, but it's definitely, I'm out there every day. So it's pretty awesome. And it's been an incredible blessing for us just to be able to get our clients outside, be outside. It allowed us to never have to shut down so that we could be, with our clients in person in the best way that we could throughout this whole craziness.
So I know you said you put some offices out there. How else did the clients use that outside space?
Oh, lots of things. The big park area they use for yoga. Leah, who we all know and love from Battle, comes out once a week and does fitness with our adolescent clients and plays with them and just helps them find their best selves. We have the pavilion. It's like 25 by 25 foot pavilion, and we run groups up there. We have individual outdoor spaces for individual therapy. They can journal outside, they can hang out and just spread out and have their mask off and take some time to just breathe. So, yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I'd like to come visit it.
Yeah,
just seeing the pictures,
welcome.
It seemed like the kind of space where it made me just want to exhale and, yeah.
It's kind of like walking into a hidden world, right? Smack in the middle of Birmingham. And I think that's what amazes me. I'm like, wow, this is right here. How lucky are we?
Yeah, and you think that might not have come about had it not been for COVID?
Yeah, most definitely. I think I was frustrated and trying to figure out, are we going to have to go virtual? Are we going to have to close? What are we going to have to do? So I was pacing the property and walking, and then just all of a sudden had this weird vision of what it could look like, and it just kind of grew from there.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's
So,
been fun.
I bet that's been fun. And watering plants is a full-time job, seems like, especially in the summer in Birmingham.
Yeah, I did get the help of an amazing landscaper to help put in some watering systems.
Yeah.
But as far as the secret garden goes, there's probably about close to 1,000 flowers, and so it's a commitment, and it's a really just nice time to kind of collect yourself in the morning and meditate a little bit.
Love it.
Yeah.
So before we go further into the discussion of what you do and how you got into working with people with eating disorders, I wanted to just ask, terminology-wise, what are some helpful terms and unhelpful terms, maybe as people who are not familiar with the world? I'm not extremely familiar with the world of eating disorders, but what are some, I mentioned earlier survivor, and you said, oh, this is a term.
Yeah.
And so tell me, just what are some unhelpful terms as it relates to this conversation?
I'm really particular about not labeling people. Eating disorders are really interesting diagnostically. They are number one, number two, compared to opioids. It's the number one killer of, backtrack. It has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric diagnosis, secondary to opioids now in the last year. So, and I think that a lot of people don't really realize that. So I think there's a lot of mischaracterization that people with eating disorders, either just need to eat or need to not eat. And it's so much more complicated than that. And I think there's just a lack of understanding, a lack of research, a lack of knowledge.
So it's almost like the name eating disorder in and of itself is a misnomer.
Yeah.
The disorder isn't.
I'm not a real fan of it. The eating aspect of it, whether you're, it runs the spectrum of people severely restricting to the point that they're emaciated, or binging and purging, people who overeat. I mean, it's all about regulation to a certain extent, about how we regulate our anxiety, how we feel, how we take care of ourselves. And I kind of think of it more as like an anxiety disorder, and what we do with the food is really just more of a symptom of something a lot bigger. So
yeah, there's a psychiatrist named Gabor Mate who I'm a big fan of, and he talks about addictions a fair amount, and he says for him the appropriate question isn't why the addiction, but it's why the pain. So what is the deeper level behind this thing? And I know you've given a lot of your life to thinking through these exact questions.
Sure.
And it didn't even cross my mind, honestly, about the other side of the spectrum of overeating, being a person who would seek out eating disorder, being in that category. But you see folks at your clinic that are on that side of things as well?
Yeah, I think it runs the spectrum. It's two sides of the same coin, though. But we live in a society that values thinness. We have all these societal ideals that shove people in boxes, that kind of fuel a lot of what people struggle with, And so I think there's this element of externalization from our society that says if you look this way, or if you manage this behavior, or if you have the willpower, that somehow you're better, or it'll make things better. And, it's so much deeper than that. I think we forget to look on the inside a lot, and not just in the mental health world, but just in general. I mean, look at what we've been through in the last year, and the polarization in our society. And, I just work every day and look for ways to just bring people together and have people look with different eyes, and I think that's the blessing of what I do, but it's really hard in the world we live in.
Yeah. And so you're trained as a therapist.
Mm-hmm. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Which basically means I do therapy. I'm not a marriage counselor. Not my thing.
Yeah. So that designation is broad enough to...
It sort
cover.
of encompasses everything, but Yeah.
What drew you to particularly, well, therapy, and in particular eating disorders as an area of therapy?
So I'm an open book when it comes to my story. I struggled for almost 15 years with severe anorexia, in and out of hospitals most of my adolescent life and my early 20s, kind of piecemealing things as I went. And in my late 20s, wound up in this really phenomenal place, which was actually the very first eating disorder treatment center in the country. And
What year would this have been?
1996.
And there was only one center in the country at this time.
Right. People were treating them in hospitals in general, psychiatric centers, hospitals. Nobody really knew much about eating disorders, anorexia to a certain extent. And yeah, I was on a cardiac unit in and out for 6 months one year. And the cardiologist there happened to know a woman who was opening a place in California and got me on the list, got me in the year that they opened. And after something like 23 different treatment centers in my life and relapse after relapse and kind of living my life as a skeleton, living in the shadows for years, wound up in this really amazing place in this house in this beautiful hills of Malibu and run by this woman who had overcome it and decided that if I could build a place, what would it look like? And so she did. And she had a totally different approach. She just was like, yeah, I'm not interested. Your eating disorder is the least important thing about you, least interesting thing about you. Who are you? What do you miss? What would other people say they miss about you? Like, what drives you? What do you want? What do you dare to want? And it was like, I'm sorry, what? Because so many years in psychiatric settings or things like that, people just expected you to be sick. They didn't ever expect anything else from me. So I didn't expect anything else from me. And here was this person in my life as I was like basically vacillating on the, life or death realm. Do you want to be a mental patient for the rest of your life? Do you want to be dead? Like, those are the hard questions.
And those weren't
that's where
questions
this
you
is
got
going.
at the other
No.
facilities.
Well, it's just medical care, or, they kind of treated you like you were crazy.
So there was no therapeutic or counseling sort of element at these other. So this was the first place here in Malibu.
Yep.
Where they were looking holistically at you as a person.
Yep.
And what else about the messaging and methods really spoke to you?
Well, she expected more. This was a group of people who were like, no, you can do more than that. Like, come on. Like, stop that. And it was also someone that was brave enough to confront me on, like, that's not helping you get what you need. Talking to people like that way is not helping you get what you need. Those behaviors are not going to, like, feed your soul. And maybe nobody else has been brave enough to tell you, but, like, nobody wants to be around you when you're like that.
Wow.
And it was like, oh, huh. I don't want to push anybody away. I want to be around people. That's what I miss.
And, 'cause some people would think that having that sort of blunt, high expectations would drive people away. But for some reason, you found that empowering.
Yeah, I think I had come into this place of being so sick for so long that people were genuinely afraid of me. To connect to me, to lose me, to not know how I was going to act or behave, not understanding me. I think there's a certain fear around what's unknown. And my family was tired. It was like, make a choice. Like, what are you doing? And I think it takes a really brave person or someone who has walked the same path to be willing to kind of go, hey, you might not like this, but, like, have you kind of thought that just maybe if you changed certain things or you kind of really thought about it, you know, it might be different, you know, and it's that self-responsibility thing. It's that personal responsibility thing about what we bring to the world, and what we get from it is part and parcel of what we bring to it, you know.
What you get from the world is part and parcel of what you bring to it.
I think so.
And what does that mean for you?
I think intuitively and deeply, I really wanted to be connected so desperately, but I don't really think I felt like I deserved it or that it was okay. And nobody was telling me it was okay. And so, you know, I got angry, and I just did all these things that pushed people away. And so I wasn't getting what I needed because I was so busy pushing everything away. It's not what I wanted to do. There's so many contradictions in that, but I never saw it. I wasn't ever challenged on it. I wasn't challenged on it. She would confront you, but with compassion. And so I learned this really valuable lesson from her about truth without judgment. Hey, no judgment here. You can keep doing what you're doing. But is it really serving the life that you really want for yourself? Is it feeding your life in a way that you feel fulfilled, and people around you feel good? And I mean, the answer for me at that point was no. I mean, I was like, dude, lock me up, commit me, you know, put me in a box, put me in the ground. Anything's better than this. And I think we just get lost in like, I'm broken. It can't be fixed. It's too much. I'm too much for the world. And, you know, I was just looking for something outside to fix me. And nobody really just said, hey, dare to want this and we'll help you figure it out. But you have to be willing to say you want it. And I think that that's a scary thing for a lot of people. You know, I think we kind of wander aimlessly in the world sometimes. I think so many people are just wanting permission to dream or to be or to own themselves and take ownership.
When I think about that in my own life, because there are things where, yeah, I could identify being afraid to speak out loud that I want a change that I know I need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in part for me, that's a fear of failure. You know, okay, well, if I never attempt it, then I can't fail at it. How do you think about why we find ourselves in that position of being afraid to do the thing that we know we should do?
Well, failure is definitely probably a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe lack of deserving. I mean, I think we live in a world that basically kind of, for me, I personally felt set up like, you know, the haves and the have-nots, and these people get to have this, and and somehow I wound up in this category of no, and but I wasn't even willing to claim it. And I think that's the thing. I mean, and I think a lot of us are looking for permission from the outside to claim those things or to be validated, like, yeah, it's okay, go for it. Whereas it's like, you can have all that, but if you're not willing to accept it and hold on to it for yourself and take ownership, it's an impossible goal, I think, to a certain extent. And I think the wanting is a really scary thing, because if you're used to not having, that's one thing. So to risk wanting is really frightening, because what if you get it and you lose it?
Yeah.
You know,
Or it's not
what
what
if
you
you get it
expected.
doesn't stay, or yeah, what if you get it and like, dang, it's not what I wanted at all. I mean, and how many of us have been there? It's
And then
like,
you
whoa,
don't-
I got
yeah.
this thing. Like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
You know?
Whereas before you at least had this hope of, well, there is a better thing, but what if you get the thing and now there is no better thing?
Right.
And that would be a pretty terrifying place to be.
Yeah.
And getting a thing would mean you'd have to reorganize your life and friendships and the way you think about yourself. And there's a whole
Yeah, wanting
renovation.
is a very complicated experience, you know? Like, what does it mean to want? And I think for me, and I think for a lot of people that I work with that struggle with eating disorders, I think that's a big piece of it. You know, there's an element of learning to live in deprivation, learning to live in a place of not wanting out of fear of what happens if it all goes to hell or, or if it doesn't work or, things like that. Or if you get it and you lose.
So am I hearing that there was something with, and what was the lady's name that ran the Malibu
Her name
clinic?
was Carolyn Costin, and the program was Montanito.
Okay. Now, was she the first person that you would say wanted it for you or let you know it was okay to want these things?
I think she was the first person that said, it's all up to you. Don't come here and expect that we're going to save you. And I think, and taught me that didn't mean I wasn't savable.
That you can actually do this.
You can do this, and I'm not going to work harder than you at your own life. I'll meet you there, but I can't do it for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the most valuable lesson, because you kind of asked, like, how this all contextually works to my now. And I've been really thinking about that. I switched to now, and as a more seasoned therapist who's been through a lot, and I really don't see patients so much anymore, is supervising others. And we've been really, really blessed in the last year. We've kind of switched the majority of our patient community has been adolescents, and it's been a really cool thing because it's not been our norm. We've had a few adolescents here and there, but
what would the average age of adolescents be?
Right now, our patient population runs anywhere from 12 to 18. Yeah. So, and it's a good mix. But I think we had gotten a letter from a family member that was like, thank you, you saved our daughter's life. And I'm like, whoa, we didn't do that. She did that. We gave her the space and hopefully the belief in herself that she could, and gave her the tools. But at the end of the day, she gets to claim that victory. That's not ours, And I think that happens a lot kind of in the world. People become like idols or celebrities, or you saved my daughter's life, or you did this, or, and I'm like, nah, I did my work 25 years ago. This was hers.
Yeah. Wow. And so, that's just amazing to think about in all sorts of spheres. That person is every person's on their own hero's journey. They're in charge of their destiny. And it sounded like these first clinics, you said you went to 20 something different.
Yeah, I was just hospitalized in and out, cardiac units, medical units.
But in those contexts, you felt like you were given no ownership of your story or your journey or your battles, and
I didn't even have a context for what my journey was, other than I am psych patient number 10 on this unit in this hospital, and and then I'd go back into the world and be like, what's happening? And then here I am in this beautiful setting, these amazing gardens, allowed to go out to lunch, allowed to go to museums, allowed to do these things.
Contextualize your struggle within life, within your journey.
Right, and that's what I always say. That treatment should always be a reflection of life in some way, and that treatment should never consume a person's life. And we see a lot of that in eating disorders. They have a high recidivism rate, so they have a high relapse rate, and they can become, in a place, out of place, in a place. And my goal is to be the one and done, or like, I see you, I hear you, you've been through this a lot. Let's find a way to like get you out of this, because if your life is revolving around treatment, that's not living. So finding a way even within the community and using community resources to plug someone into like their life so that they're not defined by their level of treatment. And even when they're with us, it's like, what can we do in the treatment model that just keeps life as normal as possible? Because this is one place in your life that you're struggling to work.
Yes.
The rest of you is fine.
Yeah. So ironically, it may, if you put someone in treatment and that becomes their life, it may, in their identity, make that the only thing about them. If that's all they see, There's a philosopher named Alistair McIntyre, I believe his name was. One of his books, he had this quote that I really love, and this is making me think of it, where he says, before I can answer the question, what am I supposed to do? Like, how then should I live? I have to first answer the question, what story or stories am I a part of? So how do I act? How do I do anything? Giving context, you said you're wandering, you felt aimless. But then here comes this lady here in California who says, we're going to plug you into the context of a story, which is life. Life's a story. And she gives you this vision of a future version of you in your story. And here's who you could be. Well, now you've got something to plug into, and a context, a life context for your journey and your struggle, which it seems like was lacking from those previous.
Yeah, and she gave me a context for my illness in a way that was no longer defining, but where there was some value in it. You know, it got me through a hard time. It had a place in my life. It wasn't like something I needed to just toss out. I needed to have an understanding and respect for the place it held in my life at the time in order to make peace with the fact that I didn't need it anymore. And I mean, that's really all, you know, I want to help anyone else do is like, I can help you find a life without this, but let's understand and respect it first. What's it do for you so that we can find other things in your life and plug other things in your life are going to meet your needs so much better and help you feel so much better about things and not kill you while you're at it. So I think that was kind of the blessing of she gave us a story that removed the shame from our experience, because I think most of us, if we're honest, can look back at certain parts of our life or things that we did or ways that we behaved and go, oh, I don't like that. I don't want to, I don't want to go there. But to be able to look at it from a place of compassionate curiosity and go, wow, what was going on in my life at that point that I felt I needed to do that? And then if you can frame that curiosity to just be able to look at it from a distance without that shame and kind of go, oh, man, I was in a lot of pain, or there were things going on that nobody knew about, or things that I felt like I didn't have a voice for or couldn't talk about. So
your perspective on yourself shifts from judgment to a curious grace almost.
Yeah, and that's what allows that to integrate. And I think that's what lets us move on, as long as we have these things going on that we compartmentalize, I think it makes it difficult to kind of just move through life and connect to the next thing. And it just becomes an integrated piece of us rather than, this heavy anchor that's sort of holding us back or defining us in some way, And then we get to decide what to do with it. Do I want to do anything with that? Do I want my history of someone who struggled with anorexia to be a part of my story moving forward? Or am I kind of done with that and I want to put that away? Or is there value in that to where I can use that to help others?
And either of those options are appropriate and
I mean, I have some great friends that I went through treatment with that are, they're my buddies for life. And, none of us should be on the planet, and we're all very fortunate to be here. And, out of 3 of us, the other 2 are like, dude, you go do that. No, thank you. Like, I can't do that anymore. I'll be helpful in whatever way I can to support you, but like, I need to just close the chapter and be done. And I get that, and I'm like, oh, well, I just want to open a new chapter and tell a different story.
In a different role in this world. Mm-hmm. And so how did you move from chapter 1 to chapter 2 there?
I started a mentor program for the program that I had graduated from. Wow. And made my recovery at the time a priority until I moved into a place where I was fully recovered. And that's the interesting thing. It's where it's different from addictions, is that with eating disorders, there are 2 schools of thought, but I come from the philosophy of you can fully recover. Move on with your life. It's never an issue. And that's a real thing, and we see it happen all the time because unlike substances with addiction, food has to be reintegrated into your life. You can't live without it. So you have to find a way to have a relationship with it. It's social, spiritual. I mean, it just shows up in every aspect of our life. It's sustaining.
So fully recover. I mean, that's a very bold thing to say. And I think
Yeah.
I read that on your website, and that is something you stand by. And so does that suggest? Because I could see at a glance that would suggest that you have a certainty that you would never have any sort of relapse or something like that. Is that basically what you think?
Well, I'd like to say that. I mean,
Sure.
never say never, but in this period of my life, I mean, for 20 years, it's never been, I don't think about it. It doesn't really impact me. I don't use my body and my food and my weight to like manage my life or my feelings. I have a pretty good relationship with that. So, relative to the society that we live in that tells women worry about your food, your weight, and your body. So, I mean, you deal with that every day, but I think there's a normality around that you have to find a balance with.
Man. So you started the mentor program there?
I started a mentor program for them, and then I went on with them to transition a program that they bought into a new program. And then I was in school. I got my degree. I opened a private practice. And then I had the opportunity to come back to Birmingham to open a residential treatment center, which was the first residential in the Southeast.
Wow.
And went on to move away from that and move into the outpatient realm here. And we've been over on the Red Mountain now for almost 13 years.
Wow. And how many do you have on your team now?
Close to 20. And I can't imagine working with any better people. I mean, we've just worked really hard, and I think grown together so much about being super passionate about what we do and putting the client first and trying to give them every opportunity to take control of their narrative.
I like that. Would you be willing to share a story of a hopeful success story, something like that? And then I'd also be maybe interested to hear a story that wasn't so positive.
I think it's so funny because even the patients that some people would say, or clients, we call them clients, or the rest of the world or the rest of the industry that I work in might kind of go, it's not a positive outcome. I have a really hard time with that because I think everybody's journey is different and they get it at different times. I mean, obviously the outcomes that we don't like are when people die. We've never had a client die in our care. And, but that would be the worst of the worst. But I think that there's value in everyone's journey and that their recovery looks different. And so also trying to give people hope that, it may take time. We don't always get the opportunity to witness someone's journey come full circle. But I like to think that we're planting seeds and that, if we don't get to see the best outcome, that doesn't mean it's not coming. It doesn't mean that they're not available for that. It doesn't mean that we didn't give them the tools that they need to find it elsewhere. Some people aren't ready. Some people need more time. Some people need a different place. It just depends on what's happening. I don't know. I mean, stories to tell for me are, I certainly am not one to ever tell anyone else's story, but to be the witness of, some incredible human beings who were on death's door. I mean, basically, or heading in a really terrible direction. Getting wedding announcements and baby announcements and baby pictures and being invited to high school graduations or college graduations or events and milestones in people's lives that have been stuck or that, they never thought they would see coming. Like, those make my day. Or when we have a really hard time with, a particular group of clients or things, or the community is really struggling and we get a phone call or an email or a letter in the mail from someone that's like, hey, I just wanted to say thank you. And even from the ones who are like, hey, I know I didn't get it then, but I got it now. It's, those are the things that matter.
Yeah. You've mentioned community a few times. What role does community play in recovery? And does it differ depending on the type of clinic, or do they all integrate community in similar ways?
I think it's different. I mean, we are wildly different than probably a lot of programs. Just number one, like, the majority of eating disorder treatment is private equity owned on a national level now. So I'm not really sure how many of us freestanding folks there still are. But and there's definitely a place for all treatment centers, but I think that, we are in a position that we're small enough. We individualize care 100%. We work a lot with our external community. We work with clients on an outpatient basis intensively so they can stay in their life. Like I said, like, we bring Leah in from Battle, or artist in from the community to work in our art studio or art therapy, or yoga teachers from around there, so that they can have the experience with us, but it's something they can plug into when they leave. That's just part of just normal life and normal coping. So, but the community also, just in terms of the culture of, you have the clients in their own community and how they support each other, and you have our staff and how we connect and support each other, and then the larger community of clients and staff and how that all works. And so I think community gets redefined as the clients change and when new staff come in, and I think it's just a way that how people connect at the time.
Gotcha. What advice would you have for someone who has a family member who is fighting an eating disorder? Maybe a parent has a child, like, that's one of these adolescents. I'm sure you talk to lots of parents, and I bet a lot of your work is in helping families as a whole deal with things. But or someone whose dear friend is struggling.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you have for that?
Be kind. Ask a lot of questions. Be bold. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, because somebody's got to ask them.
And what are the hard questions?
Are you okay? Challenging them if they say they're okay and they're not okay. I'm worried about you. Like, what you're doing isn't okay. What can I do to help? We're going to get you help. You're not, risking that they might be mad at you. They might not like it, It's sort of disrupting their status quo and their world. And I think you just have to be willing to get involved and be brave, and care, love them, despite all the insanity that's going on, and be honest about your own experience with it. It really hurts me to see you hurting, or I don't like it when you do that, or I'm really worried about you and I'm scared. I think it's important as human beings that we know the impact we have on others.
How do you balance that with, and maybe it's not a balance question, but with guilt tripping somebody? Don't you see what this is doing to me? That kind of thing.
Well, yeah, but that's a you thing. I really love you and it really sucks to see you going through this, or I'm really scared, or I don't think you have any idea what's going on, and how it's impacting all of us. And, I don't know that it's a guilt trip. I think it's just truth sometimes. I think there are elements where people choose a life path that, and I say choose lightly. I mean, this is not something that necessarily people are actively choosing to do. Trust me, if I'd had felt like I'd had another option than to starve myself to death, I certainly probably would have figured that out. But there's a huge 68%, I think it's between 55 and 68% genetic predisposition for anorexia and bulimia. So, I mean, there's a real component here, just like addictions or anything else. So, we cope however we can. But so it's not judging the person for the coping skill that they've chosen that may not be the best. But I think it's being honest about how you feel about it and how hard it is, and not only how worried you are, but it's also hard for everyone who loves them, And we've had clients come in and say, I'm doing it for so and so, and I'm like, whatever it takes. I'd rather you do it for yourself, but if you want to do it for your mom, or you want to do it for your husband, or you want to do it for your kids, and that allows you to be open to something different, well, let's just start there.
And you're not going to push them to say, you have to do it for these reasons. You're saying as long as you're taking the journey for reasons you care about.
Yeah.
That's good. So what are so those are good, that's great advice. Those are good do's. What are some don'ts, say, of someone who is close to somebody who is going through an eating disorder?
I think you have to temper your frustration. Vent it to someone else to a certain extent. Don't make it about the food. It's not about the food.
How do you see people make it about the food?
Just eat.
Like, I can cook you something better.
Right.
I can make it tastier. We can go get your favorite meal.
Just don't eat. Just stop that. Don't do that. Okay, well, if it were that easy, they wouldn't. But I think there's an element where there's a misunderstanding that eating disorders are about the food, and they're not about the food. Sometimes they're about the food. I mean, sometimes, when someone's working on recovery and having to eat and they're afraid, it's about the food in that moment. You find compassion around that place to help them eat the food. But it's really more about the fear about if I eat this, what's going to happen? It's just the underlying fear. Be supportive, find resources. Don't shame someone for how they're coping. Don't make threats, don't make negotiations, don't bribe them. If you do this or you eat this, then
Yeah.
Call a professional, call, they can call us. There's a multitude of, if you Google eating disorders and support, lots of organizations that can provide assistance or help or suggestions, or lots of websites. We do free consultation, and, we're happy to answer any questions.
How much of a role does family environment play in maybe preventing someone's journey there from progressing positively? I mean, do you ever experience that where you say, we can make some good progress here at our center, but they're going back into an environment where it's really not helpful and is only going to... does that make any sense?
Well, I think environment's a lot of it.
Especially for adolescents who they can't, move out and go somewhere else.
Well, yeah, you can't control your environment a lot of times, right? But you can control how you choose to respond to it. And it is, that's why with all clients, as much as we can, we try to work with the families, because it's relational, and the eating disorder plays a role in the relationship. The behavior impacts the relationship. And I think education, understanding, support, redefining things, kind of evaluating the circumstances. Every family is different. I don't believe in parent, spouse, family. I just don't believe in blame in general. Like there's a million factors involved, that are organic and innately internal, temperament, character of the individual who's struggling, and that may have an impact on how they're acting in their environment. The environment is going to be a piece of it, but it's not necessarily,
Which is why you would see siblings. They don't all have the
no,
same
they don't
struggle.
all have it. I mean, although there are but twin studies where twins may have it, but that's more of a genetic component.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, it's a self-responsibility piece of like, what can you do to regulate and manage, because you can't control your environment, and you're never going to be able to. So, where's the lesson in that?
Yeah, that's great. If I'm on the parent side of things, we have a little girl, and I told you I was reading Father Hunger, and you said, "Oh, that's an old classic
It's
or
an
something."
oldie,
Yeah,
but a goodie.
I mean, I've been enjoying it, and essentially they say, people like to talk about the mother's effect on the daughter, but she was making the point that the father's effect, the father has a large effect on the way a little girl can see herself and her body and things like that. So what advice would you give me as a father, and would you give parents as, say, to the degree that we can provide a loving environment, what are some do's and don'ts as you've seen, because you've been in it long enough to probably see some trends environmentally. Mm-hmm. So what sort of things would you caution against and encourage as well?
I don't think it's just parent specific. I mean, I think it's just it's from a human perspective of changing the way that we reflect each other back to each other. That we reflect the best in each other, and it's not a mirror reflection of what we see when we look in the mirror from an outside perspective, but it's like, not necessarily complimenting someone on how they look, and not making about that, but, I love how brave you are. I love how sweet you are when someone else is hurting. I love how kind you are. I love how compassionate you are. Like reflecting back the things that really identify us as a human being, It's like if someone says, "Hey, tell me about Brandon," I'm going to be like, "Dude, he's an awesome guy. He's super kind. He cares. He's curious. He wants to know more."
Mm-hmm. Whereas you could choose to reflect other attributes of mine.
Yeah, I'm like,
back to me or to others.
Dude, he's got that weird hairdo and like those
Keep it
ears
going.
and blah blah.
Yes,
And it's like, but we don't. But when we ask each other, "Tell me about so and so," that's not normally what we're looking at, and that's not what we give each other.
Yeah.
So I think that's the truth right there. That's the reality of like, that's, we're mirrors for each other, and we can reflect the worst in someone or the best in someone. So with children, it's just kind of like, wow, you're super strong, and wow, you are like so kind and so loving and, assertive instead of boss. They always say, like with girls, and don't, I love how assertive you are, or, seeing it as an assertive thing as opposed to like bossy, or trying not to label or have things that have a negative impact.
Yeah, that's a great insight, that in any interaction we have between humans, we are looking also to the person we're talking to. Like even now, I'm looking to you at a subconscious level, definitely, but maybe at a conscious level for answers to questions about myself as well, because I'm studying your responses to see, well, how valuable am I? How valuable are the words I say? What are the certain things that am I worth paying attention to?
Sure.
That's the mirror you're reflecting back to
Right.
me. And so if I'm met with judgment, then I get, okay, well, I must be just failing at everything or something like that. And, my daughter's at this age right now, she's a year and a half almost, where she just will study me. I'll just catch her eye and she's just watching me. And, it's partly that she's learning, okay, what do these big people do? What do humans do? But it's also she's learning about how valuable she is what I think I'm hearing you say. If I ignore her, she's getting these cues about whether she's worth time and attention. That's a heavy, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think it's a great responsibility we have toward one another. I'm going to have to think about that a lot. Walking mirrors, and what parts do I, with my wife, choose to mirror her good back to her or her bad back to her?
Which is also a reflection of ourselves, right? Because it depends on, that's where the self-responsibility of being aware of who I am in the moment and what I'm choosing to tap into for myself, because it's going to come out in my environment. If I wake up in a grumpy mood and I walk into the office and I've just aligned myself with the fact that I'm in a grumpy mood, well, okay, that might be reality, but like it's going to impact how I engage with everyone else, so I'm kind of going through this place of, I'm not a morning person, but I'm walking in the door at work and I'm like, normally I'm a mumbler and I got to have my coffee and I'm like consciously going out of my way to be like, hey, good morning, how are you? And check in. And it changes my experience, because I'm choosing to kind of, yes, I'm grumpy and yes, I'm cranky, but there's also more to life, and I can tap into what's going on and all the perky people around me, and I think then we're more likely to be caught in positive reflection aspect of that, as opposed to, and that's what I think when we circle back about, like what I say about what we put out has a lot to do with what we come in, because it's what we're reflecting, and a lot of times if something about you bugs me, it's really more about, it's like, the whole thing about so-and-so really bugs me, and I'm like, what do they remind you of about yourself? It's like, there's some reality to that.
Yeah, when you journal, what do they call that? Reflection.
Yeah.
I mean, that's reflecting yourself back to yourself, and I guess the therapeutic power, at least in some regard, of the journaling process or reflection is highlighting the positive parts, but also the negative parts, but for the good. But and I guess if you're only reflecting negativity of yourself, only focusing on your own negative traits, that's the kind of mirror you're training yourself to be, and then therefore you're going to be hypercritical and reflect other people's. So I guess you learn to polish that mirror, that self mirror on yourself. And maybe it took that lady in California. She was a different kind of mirror that you'd never encountered before.
Oh, yeah.
And she offered a
I was used to people reflecting back the worst of me or the sick me or that, and it was just like, and all we ever talked about was me being sick or my illness or whatever. And it's not that we didn't talk about that in my own recovery, and then we don't discuss that with others, because I think your relationship to your illness is just as important to understand so that you can create a relationship different to other things. But I do think that there's just this element of understanding a relationship to the illness in the context to the rest of you, and so that polishing off the mirror. And it's really funny because, in a lot of eating disorder treatment, they don't allow mirrors, and we have them everywhere, and we actually do mirror exposure and have people kind of do that from a challenge perspective. But there's an aspect of living life is actually being willing to look at yourself and look at others, and how does that, all work together. And we're so much more alike than we are different, but that self-reflective piece is important, because you're right, it is looking at the positive and the negative, and not choosing either and not giving them a qualitative value. I think there's a neutrality really, and it's just what piece do you want to own, and the negative just gives us a context for the better pieces of it. You can't have light without dark, so we're not all or nothing. I think it's do we want to live in our dark today, or do we want to live in our light? And what kind of life do we have based on the choice that we make? And I think, you can have light and dark in the same day.
Yeah.
And it's just, what part are you going to bed with your, and
Yeah, and if you never look at the dark, then you don't know. Then you don't ever begin the process of integrating that into your life. A lot of those things that we label maybe bad, therefore we don't look at, might be things that might actually make us very powerful if we learn to properly integrate. I think about part of the appeal of the boxing gym of Battle Republic is it. I'll see, especially ladies come in who've been told, like you said earlier, that aggression is a bad thing. So therefore, I put it on a shelf. I never deal with
right.
it, and then all sorts of issues rear their heads in their lives because that's not something they want to. Because you need aggression in areas to stake boundaries in relationships, to all sorts of ways
Sure.
to be assertive, to take ownership for your life and your story. And then they come in and they're hitting this bag and they're feeling the hormones and the aggression come out, and it's for some folks it's deeply cathartic, and I'll see people even cry in class as they're going, whoa, this is something that there is a powerful strength in me. And then to watch people over time learn to integrate that into their life, and it doesn't come out in some sort of toxic bossiness or something like that, but it comes out in making them a more complete person because they've had true reflection and not ignored this deep part of them. It's like Carl Jung talks about the integration of the shadow, and it's that sort of idea. But
well, I think the gift is the recognition that there is no negative emotion. I'm a big believer in like whatever we're attached to in the moment. I'm always real curious, like with clients, I'm like, well, what's the meaning behind that? Like, okay, so you don't like to be angry. Well, why? What is angry? What kind of meaning do you give angry? Because the meaning I give anger may be different than the meaning that you give anger. And our experience of how we grew up with it may be different. But inherently, anger in and of itself is not bad. It's more about what we use, and somehow we wind up with, repressing all these emotional qualities of ourselves that are just human nature relative to life experience that are like, these are put in the bad box and these are put in the good box, and I can, and you hear it all the time with like smile or, things like that. And it's like, I don't really want to smile right now.
I want a friend or a family member who has an anger integrated in them, so that when I want someone who's going to be angry when people abused me. I want people who are going to step in and say,
Sure.
no, you crossed the line. And I want them to have that righteous indignation.
Sure.
I want someone to have that. But if they put that in the negative box and then they have this passivity, I want if in my own growth, if I don't have at least some sort of discontent or frustration at negative habits or something like that, then I'm never going to want to overcome them. That's a really interesting point you make.
Yeah, happy's great, but you're not happy all the time, and everything is fleeting. It's moment to moment, and just be in it and own it. And I think if you can own it, then you can tame it, But if it's just in the box festering in the dark, it becomes, your imagination just runs away with it, and it's like, oh, well, I can manage this. I can do this. It doesn't have to get out of control. I don't have to be the version of anger that I experienced. And I think it was like you were asking me, when my Facebook pulled up the picture of when we were doing the boxing private 2 years ago. He was asking was that anger? What is that? And I went, I think it's passion. It's just being able to channel whatever you're feeling. We all need an outlet.
Yeah. It's in terms of classic psychological personality definitions, assertiveness. And that can be used in very negative ways, but it's also the thing that makes you go ask for a raise. It's the thing that makes you put your foot down when you see injustice. It's something that needs to be cultivated and integrated. And wow, yeah, because people joke around, we're coming to blow off steam, blow off anger, and there's something there too. We're gonna put it in an appropriate area where we're not wailing on our spouse or something like that.
And sometimes not even about that. Sometimes just energy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like, man, it has been a long day. I need to get out some energy so I can get some good sleep, you know. That's okay too. I don't think it always has to be about, I think that's the other thing, you know, the kind of the gift of being an older therapist at this point is just kind of, or just being in my life in general at almost 53, to be able to go, sometimes it just is. It doesn't need to be evaluated. We don't need to look at everything. Sometimes we just need to live our life and be in the moment and let it be what it is, you know, and that it shifts all the time. And being comfortable with that, I think, and being comfortable with ourselves, that no matter what shows up, who we are is pretty stable, and that we'll be okay.
That's easier said than done.
Oh.
Yeah, part of
Yeah.
my upbringing and personality is, no, these are the bad box things. These are the good box things. That part of you is bad and needs to be eliminated through grit and determination, you know, and all this. And I would benefit greatly from reflecting myself graciously back to myself.
Well, and that's it. And that's funny because that word has not come up this entire thing. And that's kind of my whole
Yeah, your hat says grace wins.
grace wins. And I think, and my mantra for life is fierce grace, you know, and I can't imagine a life without grace. And I don't think I really truly started to really unpack what that means, except for like the last couple of years, because I've understood the concept of extending grace to others and encouraging them to find that within themselves. But the real battle, so to speak, is accepting grace for yourself in the hard moments, in the places where it's hard, just to kind of like show up. And you know, I think grace is the thing that gives us permission to accept that we're enough as we are. You know, it's important to improve and better yourself. Sometimes it's okay to just be where you are with what you have as you are. And, you know, I think that's the fun part of sharing the gift of grace at the center. Is over the last couple of years, our clients have really embraced grace in a way that I never really conceptualized. We have a huge chalkboard and they've put tons of words on it, and there's messy grace and bold grace and forgiving grace and epic grace, and there's someone put Leah grace on the board, and that whatever you're going through, there's a grace for it. Name it, and, you know, take it.
Yeah.
Or give it.
Yeah, and to see that grace embodied by someone else, and I think this is that community piece, and the piece that you saw out on the West Coast, was you got to see the grace with flesh on, speaking to you and casting a positive vision and reflecting a positive vision. If there's someone watching now or listening now to our conversation who is in the thick of it, in the thick of the struggle, what sort of words would you, I know there's much you would say to them, but what are some things that you would want them to hear?
Don't quit. Ask for what you need, no matter how hard it is. Admit that you're not okay. Accept that it's okay to not be okay, and get help. Find one thing in your day that you can find a little bit of joy in, because it's there. You know, and that freedom is possible. You know, I think that's the hard part, is believing that, because there's an element where you just feel so bound up sometimes that it feels impossible. So I think it's trusting that. You know, I've always said that there's no freedom in fear. Fear has its place, but don't let it tie you down. Let it inform you about how to move differently and reach for something anything to hold on to, and don't quit. It's worth it.
Yeah, and that means a lot, particularly coming from someone who's been through it. And it's, how beautiful that you're now in the role that the lady played for you, years ago, and that you can now be the one who is speaking from a place of having lived it and come out the other end. And so that's awesome. Keep it up to you. That's great. I want to rapid fire some questions. I'm going to pull us out of the deep end here.
Okay, because I'm like swimming over here.
Yeah, I'm learning so much from you right here, and I think people will really benefit.
I feel like I'm babbling.
So good. Yeah, when we were getting ready to chat, you mentioned that just putting yourself out in this way is kind of a new battle for you. And so how have you thought about all that?
I think I'm getting used to it. I mean, I think I just have to take my own advice and recognize that it's something that I have to extend myself some grace for and take some ownership of.
Awesome. All right, here we go.
Okay.
We'll start it easy. Ready? What is something you're looking forward to?
Seeing my nieces tonight.
Oh, yeah. What's the circumstance there?
Just babysitting for the first
Okay.
time in over a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. How old are they?
They are 2.5 and 5.5.
Fun.
Yeah.
Wow. Will they be awake for some of that? You'll be together?
They will be. I get them for like a whole 2 hours before we go to bed.
Okay. It'll
Yes,
be,
I'm
I'm sure,
excited.
a very energetic couple of hours.
Yep.
Wow.
I hope so.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, I miss them.
Awesome. So are you a coffee or tea person?
I am a coffee person.
Okay. How much coffee do you drink?
Too much?
Every day.
Every day. It's probably more of a community thing because I go to O. Henry's every day.
Which O. Henry's do you go to?
I go to the one in Homewood. I even have my own button on the register.
That's a good spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That's
a nice
funny.
community spot.
That is funny. Yeah, I've seen you there, I believe.
yeah.
So, you a TV watcher? You watching anything right now?
I watch TV in spurts.
Haven't heard the word spurts in a while. That's good. I'm gonna try to use that later today.
Yeah, I'm more of a TV in the background kind of person while I'm getting other things done. I do really, really like The Blacklist, though, and I've recently gotten into that, so that's pretty cool.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How about podcasts? Are you a podcast person?
I am not,
Yeah.
but that may change after today.
The Level Up podcast. How about music? You listen to music?
I love music.
Yeah. What's on your playlist right now?
I have kind of gotten into this band who I'm sure you've heard of, but I never heard of Passenger.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm terrible at names of songs and things like that, but
Is Let Her Go? Is that by?
I think that's
Passenger?
one of them. And then I've been revisiting some old favorites like Amanda Marshall and Trash Can Sinatra's and some oldies but goodies. And then I've been sort of hitting up a little Ani DeFranco lately because I was a little bit of a groupie for a while. So, yeah.
Okay, a solid list for people to go check out for sure.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah.
Is there anything right now that's currently frustrating you?
Advancing the center in a way that would allow us to provide more access and more care. I feel a little stuck on how to make that happen, but I'm determined.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I guess you've brought new people on board somewhat recently for that purpose.
I have. It's also a really hard time to hire right now. So the national wait time for eating disorder treatment or for a bed, so to speak, is probably 10 to 14 weeks. No joke.
Wow.
Like, it's just exploded. Pandora's box has just exploded.
During the time of the pandemic.
Well, yeah, and people are like, so is that because of COVID? And I think it really just provided an opportunity to, like, expose a problem that's just been going on for a long time, and our need to respond differently.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So my frustration is being able to meet that need.
Yes. Well, I hope y'all find ways to grow. Is there a book you would recommend, or is there a book that you've gifted more than any other books?
The Giver
The Giver.
by Lois Lowry.
Why is that?
I think it's an incredible metaphor for what the world says we're supposed to be responding to, and learning to listen to what's coming from our own soul and following it in opposition to what the world says.
Awesome. Yeah, that was I was young when I read that one. I bet I'd get a lot more if I went back and read it now. Awesome. Just a couple more. If you could have, here's a nice hypothetical for you. If you could have lunch with any male, past or present, who would it be, and what would you eat?
Oh, wow. Any male, past or present. Past would be my nephew, Matt, who was a Methodist pastor, passed early in his early 20s. And what would I eat? Well, if I'm with Matt, there's not going to be anything green on my plate. So probably a steak.
Nice.
And some potatoes in his honor.
Love it. And we'll flip it now. If you could sit down for dinner with any female, who would it be? And what would you eat? What or where would you eat?
Any female. Dude, man, I'd say I'd really have to hit the New York streets, find some crazy little restaurant with Ani DeFranco.
And what would you hope to get out of that encounter and conversation?
I think I would kind of want to know what her experience was in finding the grace and softness for herself in her own path. Because I've followed her since the beginning, and she's just, she has this radical capacity to embody grace in a way that I think is super fierce. But I also think it's that truth without judgment thing. And I don't know. I really admire that.
That's great. I think this is a great place to wrap it up.
Cool.
Well, how you doing?
I'm all right.
Good. Well, thanks so much for your
Appreciate
time.
it.
Yeah, I really learned a lot from this conversation.
Think I did too.
Awesome. Great.
All right. Bye.